My name's Mark. I'm 54. And if someone had told me a decade ago that the same little girl who used to beg me to braid her hair before school would someday act like I didn't even exist on her wedding day, I probably would have laughed it off, thinking they were joking. But that's the thing about family. The people you pour the most into are often the ones who believe they deserve even more. And sometimes your worth only becomes visible to them the moment your credit card gets declined. Emma came into my life when she was just 9. Her mom, Sarah, and I were both climbing out of messy divorces. Hers, admittedly, was far more chaotic than mine. Emma's dad, Brian, was barely present. He'd show up maybe twice a year, hand over a check, grab an ice cream with her, then vanish again for half a year like clockwork. Meanwhile, Sarah and I were slowly building something solid, a real foundation day by day. I never set out to replace her father, but I made sure I was there for the things that mattered. Her school performances, scraped knees, late-night math assignments, and even that first brutal heartbreak. I showed up, even when it wasn't easy. Actually, especially when it wasn't easy. With time, she started calling me Dad. I never pushed for that. In fact, I made it clear early on that I'd never try to step into that role unless it was something she truly wanted. But when she looked up at me after her middle school graduation and softly said, "Thanks, Dad," I'll admit, it hit me hard. Sarah squeezed my hand in that moment, and I could tell she knew exactly what it meant to me. I paid for her braces, helped her buy her first car. Nothing fancy, just a reliable used Honda I'd been saving up for. When she got accepted into her dream college, I drove the U-Haul myself and spent 2 sleepless nights assembling IKEA furniture in her dorm room. Whether it was Christmas, her birthday, or just a rainy Tuesday when she forgot her umbrella, I was there. Not out of obligation. I did it because I loved her. But something started to shift when she turned 20. It wasn't obvious at first. The thank yous became less frequent. Her calls began to sound more like errands than conversations. Then came senior year, and with it, Brian's grand re-entrance. Suddenly, he was all over Facebook, posting throwback pictures of him and Emma, adding captions like, "So proud of my little girl." He cropped Sarah and me right out of those photos like we never existed. Emma ate it up like she'd been starving for his attention. And honestly, I understood. Every child craves validation from their parent, even the one who only shows up when it suits them. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been quietly replaced, like a long-term substitute teacher who never got tenure. Then came the engagement. She was over the moon, and at first I truly was happy for her. I still remember sitting on the couch as she waved her hand, letting the diamond catch the light. Sarah clapped with joy, and I hugged Emma tightly. "We're so proud of you," I told her. Emma smiled back, but something about it felt off. It didn't quite reach her eyes. And then she said, "I'm just so glad I'll have both my parents there to walk me down the aisle." I blinked. Sarah shot me a quick glance and started to speak. "You mean," she began, but Emma interrupted her. "Of course I mean Dad," she said, meaning Brian. Not the man who taught her how to ride a bike or who stayed up all night with her when she had a fever. Not me. I shrugged it off at the time, told myself she was just feeling nostalgic. Maybe she was reconnecting with her past, trying to bridge a gap, and I could respect that. I was even willing to step aside if that's what she needed, but the signs didn't stop. She started calling Brian Dad again and began referring to me as Mark whenever others were around. She even removed my last name from her social media, changing it from Emma Callahan back to her birth name. She never asked me to speak at the wedding. When I gently offered to help with some wedding expenses, she smiled, nodded, and casually asked if I could cover the $12,000 deposit for the venue. No discussion about paying it back. No thanks. Just a quiet expectation that I'd take care of it. And I did, not for her, but because I knew Sarah couldn't bear the thought of her daughter's big day falling apart. I kept telling myself not to take it to heart, that I was doing it out of love, for the sake of family. But as time went on, I felt less like a father and more like a walking ATM. Sarah saw it too. She tried to speak with Emma about it, gently, trying not to stir conflict. But Emma would shut it down every time, accusing her of guilt-tripping me. just because she wanted her real dad in her life. That word, real, hit harder than I let on. Just a week before the wedding, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to catch. I'd come home early and paused in the hallway when I heard Sarah and Emma in the kitchen. "He's paid for almost everything, Emma," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "You can't just pretend he doesn't exist. He's been more of a father to you than Brian ever was." Emma scoffed. "That was his choice. Nobody made him do any of that." "You used to call him Dad," Sarah pressed gently. "That was before I had a real one again," Emma snapped. I turned and walked right back out the door before either of them noticed me. I didn't say a word. I just drove. No destination, no plan, until the gas light lit up on the dashboard. Then came the wedding day. I put on my best suit, took 3 tries to get the tie knot just right. I got there early on the wedding day, helped set up chairs, coordinated with the catering team, and made sure the sound system didn't fail. Emma walked past me without much more than a glance. Brian strolled in late, drenched in cologne so overpowering it could have emptied the room. She lit up when she saw him, squealed like he'd just returned from deployment, throwing her arms around him. I stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold like a background character in a film I had funded, but wasn't allowed to appear in. During the ceremony, I sat quietly next to Sarah, and when the officiant asked who would be walking her down the aisle, she reached for Brian's arm and grinned, like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was no mention of me, not even a sideways glance. But the reception made it worse. The father-daughter dance went to Brian. During her speech, Emma thanked her mother, her amazing new in-laws, and this one stung. My incredible dad, Brian, who came back into my life at the perfect time. She never said my name, not once. Still, I didn't make a fuss. I didn't walk out. I smiled when eyes were on me. I shook hands, toasted the couple, applauded the speeches. But inside, something was coming apart. Not fast, not loud, just this slow, quiet unraveling. After the cake had been sliced and most of the guests had headed home, I was at the back of the hall grabbing my jacket when Emma walked over. She looked stunning, glowing even, but there was a smugness to her exhaustion, like someone who'd been praised all day and was basking in the afterglow. She handed me a folded slip of paper. "Final balance," she said with a chipper tone, like we were settling a bill after lunch. "Figured you'd want to handle it before we leave for the honeymoon." I opened it, my jaw clenched at the numbers scribbled across the page. I looked at her. She stood there smiling, waiting for the usual response. For me to nod, pull out my wallet, and say nothing. But this time I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked right past her, down the steps, through the parking lot, and out into the night. I didn't say a single word. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of anger. That would have been easier. It wasn't even hurt that kept me awake. It was something colder, quieter, like a door had shut somewhere deep inside me. And I just didn't have the strength or the will to ever open it again. I laid there for hours, staring at the ceiling, watching the headlights cast slow-moving shadows across the walls. Sarah got home late. She looked stressed, frazzled, like she could already feel something had shifted. She tried to start a conversation, but I gently stopped her. "Not tonight," I said. I wasn't ready to put into words what I already knew deep down. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, dozens of messages. Sarah, Emma, even Brian, which shocked me considering he hadn't even acknowledged me during the wedding. I ignored them all. Instead, I brewed a strong cup of coffee, went into my home office, and pulled out a thick binder labeled wedding expenses. Inside were receipts, wire confirmations, vendor invoices, everything sorted and documented. The total came to just under $38,000. I had personally paid for more than 80% of the wedding, including every extravagant, last-minute add-on Emma simply had to have. Imported floral centerpieces, a fancy taco bar for late-night snacks, that absurd champagne tower. And the final kicker? That balance Emma had handed me the night before wasn't even a real invoice. It was just a number she scribbled down herself, packed with line items I'd already covered. In short, she tried to double charge me. assuming I'd be too soft, too sentimental to call her out on it. So I spent that entire Sunday disputing every payment I'd made. I reached out to the venue and every vendor I'd dealt with directly, attaching receipts, emails, and proof of transaction. I also froze the remaining wedding funds sitting in a joint account I'd opened with Sarah, meant to cover any last-minute emergencies in the days leading up to the event. Then I sent Emma a message. Simple. Director. Effective immediately, I will no longer be responsible for any further wedding-related costs. Any outstanding balances are between you and your biological father. Please communicate through your mother moving forward. Wishing you all the best in your new chapter. I didn't even bother signing it, just hit send. Then I powered off my phone. That night, Sarah and I finally had the conversation. No more sidestepping, no more pretending. She was devastated. Not just about Emma, but about what all of it had done to us, how it had poisoned everything. She admitted she'd seen the changes in Emma too, but had clung to hope. I thought it was just wedding stress, she said. I thought once she saw how much you did for her. She did see, I replied softly. She just didn't care. Sarah didn't argue. The days that followed were a blur. Emma sent a long, drawn-out email, not to apologize, but to justify. She said it wasn't her intention to hurt me, but it was her special day, and she shouldn't have to fake anything just to keep others comfortable. She even called me immature for walking out and abandoning my responsibilities. That was rich, considering the only reason she had a wedding at all was because I made it happen. I didn't write back. Then about a week later, I got a voicemail from Brian. Yeah, the same guy who didn't put down a cent, showed up late, smiled for the camera, danced a few dances, and dipped. His voice was casual, like we were buddies. Man to man, he said, I think you overreacted. You know how girls are with their dads. It's emotional. She needed me and I stepped up. Don't punish her for choosing her real family. I just stared at my phone like it had grown teeth. Stepped up, he said. That's rich. I was the one who stepped up when Emma was lying in a hospital bed at 13, recovering from appendicitis, while Brian claimed he was too busy to visit. I stepped up again when her financial aid collapsed her sophomore year, and she was too ashamed to tell anyone. I found out, covered it, and never made her feel guilty. I stepped up day after day, year after year, quietly, consistently, without ever asking for praise or recognition. But Brian buys her a shiny watch, slips into a tuxedo, and stands beside her for a few wedding photos, and suddenly he's crowned Father of the Year. That's when I realized I wasn't just walking away. I was done playing the fool. I called the accountant who handles my finances and instructed him to begin dissolving the joint account Sarah and I shared. Then I updated my will. Emma's name came off the list of beneficiaries. Instead, I made a sizable donation to a scholarship program for foster youth. Kids who, unlike Emma, genuinely needed a hand, not just handouts. Then I sat down and wrote a letter to Sarah. It wasn't angry, it wasn't bitter, it was final. In the letter, I explained that while I didn't place the entire blame on her shoulders, I couldn't continue investing in a family that treated me like a wallet, where my value was measured in dollar signs. I told her that I still cared about her deeply and always would, but I had to salvage what little dignity I had left. I folded the letter neatly and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I moved into a small condo across town, a place I'd quietly bought months ago just in case. I never thought I'd actually need it, but maybe deep down I saw this coming. Maybe I'd just been waiting for a reason. Weeks passed, then a month. Sarah reached out a couple times, Emma didn't. Through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that Emma and Brian had applied for a personal loan to cover the rest of the wedding costs and were turned down. They apparently couldn't understand why the wealthy stepdad had vanished into thin air. Then one quiet afternoon at work, I got a message from Sarah. She's here. She wants to talk. Please, she's crying. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there staring at the screen, letting all the memories come rushing back. Every smile I'd given that girl, every quiet moment of fatherhood that I thought mattered, every dollar spent, every sleepless night, every proud nod at graduations, every whispered, "Don't worry, I've got you." Then I stood up, slipped my briefcase shut, and drove home. When I walked in, Emma was sitting on the couch in the living room, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes puffy and red from crying. She stood up the moment she saw me. "Mark," she started, but I raised a hand. What I said next, and what happened after, changed everything. She opened her mouth again, but I remained silent, calm, grounded. I walked past her, placed my briefcase down on the table, like I'd just come home from a regular day at the office, then turned and looked her straight in the eyes. Really looked. Not with rage, but with something firmer, heavier, the kind of weight that comes from reaching the end of the line. "You know," I said, "when you were 13, you begged me to come to your school's father-daughter breakfast. You didn't want to sit alone. You told me Brian hadn't even texted you in 6 months. I took the morning off work, wore that god-awful blue tie you liked, and brought the muffins you loved. And you held my arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. You told everyone there I was your dad." Emma blinked, her lips tightening, her cheeks flushed, whether from shame or sorrow. I couldn't quite tell. "You remember that?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "I remember everything, Emma," I said, "because I was there for everything, and I never kept score. Not then anyway, but clearly someone else did." She lowered her gaze, staring down at her hands, fidgeting with her fingers. "I messed up," she said, her voice low. "I know I did. I was just trying to make peace with everything. Brian wanted to be part of my life again, and I didn't think it would hurt you this much." I tilted my head slightly. "Didn't think?" I asked. "Or didn't care?" She winced. "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I replied, my voice calm but steady. "That you made me pay for a seat at a table I was never really invited to?" I took a slow breath. "You walked right past me over and over, and I told myself to let it slide each time. I sat through every cold shoulder, every omission, every quiet rewrite of 10 years of my life. And even then, I still paid for the napkins." That one caught her off guard. She blinked, confused. "Napkins?" "Yeah," I said, almost chuckling at how ridiculous it sounded out loud. "Custom linen napkins, $4.72 a piece, embroidered with your new last name. The one I don't belong to." Silence hung in the room like fog. "I never meant for things to turn out like this," she whispered. I got caught up in the idea of finally having my real dad around. I thought—" "You thought I'd just take it," I cut in, softer now. "Like I always have." At that moment, Sarah stepped out from the hallway. Her eyes were red. She must have heard everything. She didn't say a word, but Emma turned toward her, like a drowning person reaching for a lifeline. "Mom, tell him," she pleaded. But Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, Emma, not this time." Emma looked between us, and for the first time she seemed to truly understand that no amount of guilt or sentiment was going to undo what she'd done. The floor beneath her was shifting, and she didn't know how to find her balance. "I didn't expect you to disappear," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I just stopped showing up for people who treat me like a utility. You made your choice at the wedding. Now I'm making mine." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No anger, no gratification, just a deep, steady stillness. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice soft. "To fix things." "No," I replied. "You came to stop the damage. That's not the same." She sank onto the couch, her energy draining like a balloon with a slow leak. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just done?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know," I admitted. "But what I do know is that forgiveness doesn't just show up after a silence like that. It's earned, and I'm not handing it out like another blank check." Her shoulders dropped, and for the first time, no protests, no excuses, no last-minute explanations. She just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of something she hadn't even realized she'd destroyed until it was far too late. I picked up my things, gave Sarah a small nod, and walked toward the door. Just as I reached it, Emma called after me, her voice trembling. "What do I have to do to fix this?" I paused, my hand resting on the doorknob. "You start," I said, without turning around, "by not asking me to tell you." Then I stepped outside. I didn't go far. Just took a slow walk around the block, long enough to breathe to settle the ache in my chest. I wasn't sure if this was the end forever, but I was sure I was done being taken for granted. And what happened next? Well, that's when things got real. The next morning, my phone stayed quiet. No texts, no voicemails, no apologies, just an empty inbox and a kind of silence I hadn't experienced in years. Still, I checked, not because I expected her to beg, but because part of me needed to know if she'd fight at all. She didn't. For 3 days, nothing. Sarah sent one short message. "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. I wasn't angry with her. Not exactly. But I needed time. I needed distance. For too long, I'd been the invisible foundation everyone stood on. And now that I'd stepped away, the cracks were starting to show. I wasn't interested in playing the quiet, dependable background character anymore. I wanted to see if anyone even remembered who was holding the camera the whole time. On the fourth day, there was a knock at my office door. Not the condo, my actual office, where I ran my consulting firm. My assistant buzzed me, her voice a little uneasy. "There's a young woman here," she said. "She says her name's Emma. No appointment." I hesitated. My first instinct was to tell her to turn Emma away, but something in my assistant's tone made me pause. Maybe the way she said her name, like it carried weight or worry. "Send her in," I said. Emma entered the room slowly, not with the confident flair she used to wear like expensive perfume, but cautiously, like someone walking into a chapel or a hospital room. Her hair was pulled back. No heavy makeup, no designer bag slung over her shoulder, no smirk, just Emma, and a thin folder tucked tightly under her arm. She sat down across from me and opened it without a word. Inside were neatly arranged documents, receipts, bank records, line-by-line breakdowns. On top was a typed letter, centered and formal, with the heading, "Wedding Expense Reconciliation Report." She slid it across the desk. "I went through everything," she said quietly. "Every vendor, every payment, every transaction. I contacted the venue, the florist, the caterer. I made a complete list of what you paid and what I owe. I included interest, broke it into a repayment schedule over 3 years. If you accept the term," she added, "I'll sign it." I stared at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't performing. She sat across from me, doing the one thing I never saw coming, taking full accountability. "I got your message," she said quietly, "and honestly, I hated it. At first I thought you were overreacting, maybe even being petty, but then I stopped looking at it through my lens and started seeing it from yours." She paused, eyes lowering. "I remembered the night you drove 6 hours back from a business trip because I forgot my college essay deadline. I was panicking, and I needed help proofreading. You sat with me until 2 in the morning, then left at 5 to make it to a meeting in another state. You never complained. You didn't even bring it up afterward. You just did it." She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers again. "And I remembered my 16th birthday. Brian had promised he'd come, but he didn't show, like always. You spent the whole afternoon driving around, trying to find the last copy of that out-of-print book series I loved. You handed it to me like it was no big deal." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "And I hugged you, really hugged you, because in that moment, I didn't miss him. Not even a little." She took a breath, steadied herself. "The more I remembered, the worse I felt, because I realized it wasn't just that I left you out of the wedding. I erased you from my story, like you were just a placeholder until my real dad showed up." She finally looked up, really looked at me. "But you were never a placeholder," she said. "You were the one who stayed." I didn't say anything right away. My throat was too tight to trust my own voice. "I'm not asking for forgiveness today," she continued. "I just needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I'm going to fix it. Not with speeches, with time. With actions." I opened the folder. The numbers were accurate. Every expense, every payment, clearly laid out. She'd even included a clause. If she missed more than 2 payments in a row, the entire debt would be due immediately. It wasn't about the money. It never was. She knew that. And that's why this moment meant everything. After a long pause, I gave her a small nod. "All right," I said. "Let's see how serious you are." She didn't sigh in relief. What I saw in her expression was something deeper. Maybe resolve. Maybe the first real piece of peace between us. That was 6 months ago. Since then, she's made every single payment. Small ones at first, $150 here, $200 there, but steady, reliable. More than that, she's been showing up. She calls every week. No grand speeches, no forced apologies, just presence. She even invited me to dinner, just the three of us, her husband, and me. Not a big production, just a quiet meal, a chance to reconnect, to laugh, to begin again. Sarah and I, we've had our own path to walk. We didn't rush back into things. We gave each other space. And in that space, we finally talked. Really talked. More honestly than we had in years. Now, we're seeing each other again, slowly, carefully, like two people learning how to trust, this time with eyes wide open. Last week, Emma asked me something I didn't expect. She told me she's pregnant, due in a few months. And then, her voice trembling, she asked if I'd want to be a part of the child's life. I could tell she was bracing herself for rejection, for me to say no, but I didn't. I smiled. I've got a whole library of bedtime stories ready to go, I told her. She cried, but this time they were happy tears. We're not perfect. There are still wounds. But scars, they don't mean failure. They mean healing. They mean something's mending. And for the first time in years, I don't feel invisible. I feel seen. Not for the money I gave or the tasks I completed, but for the man I was, the man I am. And sometimes that's the real victory. Not the dramatic walkout, not the cold silence, but becoming someone they can't ignore anymore. Someone they finally see. Because in the end, I didn't leave to punish them. I left to remind myself that I still mattered. And now, they know it too.